Good afternoon now, and welcome to the Heritage Foundation, to our Lewis Lehrman Auditorium. We, of course, welcome those who join us on all of these occasions on our heritage.org website. I would ask everyone here in-house, if you'll be so kind to check that cell phones have been turned off. It's always appreciated. We will, of course, post the program on the Heritage homepage following today's presentations for your future reference. And our internet viewers are always welcome to send questions or comments at any time, simply emailing us at speaker@heritage.org. Leading our discussion is James Shirk, Senior Policy Analyst in Labor Economics, part of our Center for Data Analysis in our Institute for Economic Freedom and Opportunity. Mr. Shirk researches ways to promote competition and mobility in the workforce instead of erecting barriers preventing workers from getting ahead. His commentary and analysis has appeared in major newspapers and other publications. He has been a guest expert on many network TV shows as well, and he frequently testifies before Congress on labor issues. He earned his bachelor's degree in economics and mathematics at Hillsdale. He received a master's degree in economics and a concentration in econometrics and labor economics from the University of Rochester in New York. Please join me in welcoming James Shirk. James?
Well, thank you all for being here, and I'd like to introduce our other two speakers. Terry Bowman, to the left here, is the founder of Union Conservatives. After 13 years of being flooded with far-left union political propaganda, UAW Ford employee, Terry Bowman, decided in 2010 to start organizing union members who disagree with the political activities of the union officials. As you can imagine, that was an interesting time for him because 2 years later you had Michigan, his home state, pass a right-to-work law. And so unions come. He's testified before Congress on right to work. He's been asked to speak in a number of other states. There's many union members who disagree with the union's political activities. Terry's one of those who actually stands up and takes a public stand and explains that workers ought to be able to decide for themselves, and union bosses ought not be able to curtail that. So we're really pleased to have Terry come here and provide his insights as a current UAW member in Michigan. And we also have Mrs. Amy Milliken, who's the county attorney for Warren County, Kentucky, which, as many of you may know, Warren County, which encompasses Bowling Green, it was the first county in the nation to pass a local right-to-work law under the county's home rule statute. And she wrote an opinion letter that all of you would have had access to on the way in, to pick up a copy of, explaining why she thinks that the county has the legal authority to do so. And so Amy's going to talk in a bit about how basically why the county went ahead and passed this local right-to-work ordinance, and then the benefits she sees it providing to the workers in the county. But we just released this report this morning that hopefully this background that hopefully all of you have had a chance to see. Unions charge higher dues and pay their officers larger salaries in non-right-to-work states. And that pretty much sums up our findings here. Unions have a monopoly in the workforce. If you're in a unionized company, you cannot negotiate for your own salary and your own benefits before you're with your boss. If you think that you're entitled to a performance pay and you'd like recognition for that, you can't ask for it. You have to go through the union. And you don't even have a choice of unions. You have one union that is the exclusive representative. So if you're a UAW employee and you think that the electrical workers might do a better job, you can't have the electrical workers go and negotiate a contract for you. There's one and only one union in the workforce. On top of this monopoly on workers being forced to only buy one product and only having a choice of one product, unions enjoy a second monopoly that virtually no other businesses in America enjoy, and that they can force their customers to purchase their product. In the 26 states without right-to-work laws, union members, or rather workers at unionized companies, must pay union dues or their equivalent to a union, or they get fired. Now, unions don't have to. The union argument for the justification for this is, look, we're required to represent workers, that we negotiate a contract and it covers everyone equally, and therefore they only need to pay their fair share of these the dues that cover this. It would be a compelling argument if it were true. However, the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that unions do not have to negotiate on behalf of all workers in a company, that they're allowed to negotiate what are known as members-only contracts, and if they want to, they can negotiate a contract that only covers dues-paying members. Unions generally don't do that because they have more bargaining leverage if they negotiate on behalf of everyone. No one can negotiate separately from the union. But doing that, they then proceed to charge everyone dues and force everyone to pay dues. Now, right to work has become a pretty hot topic. As many of you know, Indiana and Michigan just became the 23rd and 24th right to work states in 2012. And there's a number of other states, Wisconsin, West Virginia, New Mexico, Kentucky, all of which are now actively contemplating passing right to work laws. In Kentucky, you've had a number of counties that have gone a step further and said, look, the state legislature doesn't look like it's going to act. The bill passed through the state Senate, the state House won't act. So we're going to act on our own. The county or the state has delegated to counties the right to pass economic development measures. Well, this will attract jobs and businesses. We're going to pass a local right to work. And unions have reacted by not championing these as an expansion of worker freedom. Unions do not like the idea of voluntary dues. And their attacks on this are they basically argue that these are quote-unquote anti-union measures. So to quote the Wisconsin AFL-CIO, right to work is, quote, an anti-worker bill brought to you by out-of-state special interests that want to drive down wages and line their own pockets. Now, I'm an economist. And as an economist, I find it very strange to hear people talking about ending a monopoly as something that would hurt consumers. How do we... Here we go. This is a diamond. It is a diamond that was mined by the De Beers Diamond Cartel. Now, throughout most of the 20th century, De Beers had a monopoly on global diamond production. They controlled somewhere north of 80 to 90% of the overall diamond market. Now, as a man who recently proposed to a wonderful lady and was taking a look at diamond prices, I'm quite aware that diamonds are a pricey good. And why are they pricey? Primarily because De Beers controls the diamond market. You control if you have a monopoly, and critically, if you have a monopoly where you don't have to fear about competition. It's one thing if you have a monopoly because you're just that good, and consumers choose to buy your product because you have to stay that good, or consumers are going to go elsewhere. But if you have a monopoly where you don't have to worry about competition because you say own all the diamond mines in the world and the potential diamond mines in the world, then what are you going to do? Well, you're going to jack up prices. This is the way pretty much every business monopoly operates, at least when they don't have to worry about a new entrant coming into the market and competing for business. What else are you going to do? Well, how much are you really going to worry about putting in the hard work, about innovating and controlling costs? What sort of institutional incentive are you going to have to put the customer first and to try and hold down your costs in production? Not that much. AT&T used to have a monopoly on telephone and communication services. Congress got rid of that, I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s. If that monopoly had never gone away, do you think that they would have invented the iPhone? No, they didn't. It was Apple who came in because there was no longer a monopoly, the competitive upstart that came in and provided the new products and services. So economists have long known that monopolies lead to higher prices and higher cost and less innovation on the part of businesses. However, no one has looked yet at the union monopoly. This here is just a map of right-to-work states. You can see there are 24 states with right-to-work laws, 26 states without them. In those 26 states, while the workers don't get to choose between unions or whether or not they want union representation, the union has to persuade the workers to voluntarily purchase their services. They have to persuade the workers that the union is worth its keep. How do union behavior differ between right-to-work and non-right-to-work states? I was actually very surprised when I started taking a look at this. I was writing a paper on right-to-work, and I just wanted to insert this as a little factoid because obviously you would assume that unions charge more and pay their officers higher salaries and don't worry as much about costs, but no one's taken a look at this yet. And I realize the reason no one's taken a look at this yet is it's only recently the data has become available. In the 2000s, Elaine Chao, when she was Labor Secretary, modernized the union financial reporting information. She required the unions to itemize all their expenditures over $5,000, and she basically made all these reports available online on the internet. So before, if you wanted to get this information, you had to go into a room in the Department of Labor and ask for the paper copies by hand. Now, you can go online and download it all in one massive zip file for each year, which is exactly what we did. But this here shows you some of the information you've got. The unions have to report exactly how much they're receiving in dues. In this case, it's about $6.6 million. They have to say where they're spending the money. So you can see about half of it gets kicked up to the, this is UAW Local 600 in Michigan, by the way, but half of it gets kicked up to the international headquarters. and their state and local headquarters, and other spending on other items. They also have to report something else fun, the salaries they pay their officers. And so this is for the same union. We can see that there's several vice presidents here making about $130,000 a year. Some of their secretaries who are also making a similar amount. And so you can now go online. You can go to unionreports.gov, download all this information, and figure out exactly how much the unions are charging. You just divide the dues per member, and that gives you a figure for their dues per member. And you can directly access the salaries of their top officers by the officer's position. And so we took a look at this at Heritage. And what you find is that economic theory is a fairly accurate predictor of union behavior. That unions behave with their monopoly just the same way that businesses behave when they have an uncontested monopoly. So this here is a chart of the dues per paying member that unions charge their members. Now there will be a number of union members who might be honorary members or retired members or members who otherwise don't pay dues. So what we did is we reported both sets of figures, but this is for the figures of people who are actually paying members. And what you can see is there's an enormous difference in dues between right-to-work states and non-right-to-work states. So the average union member in a non-right-to-work state is paying about $650 a year in dues, and in a right-to-work state they're paying about $515 a year. That's a difference of more than 25%. That is a huge difference. Now, we've presented the data in the report in two different ways. One is by weighting it by union membership, and one is not weighting it. So simply, to explain why we did this, if you look at the figures on overall employment in the U.S., big businesses, businesses with more than, say, 1,000 employees or 10,000 employees, are a tiny, tiny fraction of overall businesses in the country. It's like 2 or 3% of businesses are big businesses. And yet those businesses employ about 40% of all workers in the country. Simply because the average worker and the average business are different. The average business is a small business. Many of them are mom and pop. But the big businesses with 10, 20, 30, 40,000 employees employ a whole lot more businesses per business. And so the unweighted figures simply show the average across all unions, treating all unions equally. It shows how the average union responds to the right-to-work law. When we weight it by union membership, what happens is we're showing how the average union worker is affected by right-to-work law, taking into account that far more workers are going to be represented in the larger locals. So the UAW Local 600 there had about, I think it's around 25,000 members or so. Several of the other UAW locals had 300 or 400 members. And so you're recognizing the fact that the behavior of the larger unions is more representative of the typical union member than the way some of the smaller unions behave. So no matter how we slice the data, you find that the unions charge a lot more in dues per member in non-right-to-work states. That doesn't necessarily show that unions are taking advantage of their monopoly, because there's a lot of differences between right-to-work states and non-right-to-work states. Unions love to call right-to-work for less. And the reason they can make this argument is because virtually every southern state, depending on what you consider Kentucky and Missouri, whether or not you consider them southern. As a former Canadian who moved to Michigan, for the record, I consider anyone south of Cleveland to be southern.
Kentucky's southern.
But virtually every southern state has a right-to-work law. Southern states also have, for historical reasons, lower cost of living. So yes, union members in right-to-work states earn less, but their purchasing power is no different from workers in non-right-to-work states. So this could simply be reflecting the fact that workers in right-to-work states earn less money, but with their purchasing power, they make the same. A lot of unions charge dues as simply a fraction of the member's salary, 1%, 2% of the worker's salary. So what you have to do is you have to control for factors like that. And that's what we did in the paper. I'll spare you the technical details. You can read it. You can read through the appendix. But the short form is once we control for factors like the particular union that you belong to, so the UAW or the SEIU or what have you, and the average wages of union members in those states, which is going to be obviously reflective of differences in cost of living and such, and also directly feeds into the dues because you're charged a portion of your dues, we still find that there is a substantial premium in terms of dues charged. When you're weighting, these figures up here show weighted by union member, and so they're the experience of the typical union member. It's about 14, 15% higher dues per paying member. That's a lot. That is a substantial increase in the prices that the unions are charging their members. If you look at it as a per union instead of weighted by union member, it's about 7 to 10%. And so as we summarize in the report, it's roughly 10% higher wages, higher dues that the unions charge when they can force you to pay dues. Surprising? Not really. This is the way monopolies behave. They charge more. Businesses tend to want to maximize their revenue, and when the unions can force you to pay dues, they maximize their revenue. So where's the money go? Well, part of the answer is that the unions don't put the customer first because they don't have to. This here chart shows the average salaries paid to top union officers. We picked 4 top positions in a number of unions. There's other ones we could have taken a look at, like secretaries, secretary treasurers, but we focused here on presidents, vice president, treasurer, which would include a secretary treasurer, but not some of the secretaries we showed earlier in the in there, and then business managers, who in many union locals, the business managers are the top official. What do we find? Well, we find that with a monopoly, unions don't care quite so much about holding down their labor costs. Not a shocking occasion. Economists have been noting this for a number of years, that so-called X inefficiency, that that monopolies actually tend not to maximize their profits because they don't care as much about holding down their costs. And what we find here is that depending on how you look at it, you're looking at roughly 25 to 35% higher salaries for these top officers, and it's substantially higher. So we're taking a look at the typical union president in a right-to-work state. He makes about $132,000 a year. It's not a bad income, but a lot of Americans would be pretty darn happy with that. But if he's not in a right-to-work state, he makes $170,000 per year on average. But a lot of the people listening to this and in this room would take that as a salary. Myself certainly included. But again, this is not the end of the story. Why? Because again, there could be other factors that are feeding into this. It could simply be the fact that the union officers are in the right-to-work states. There's a few things. It could be one that you've got lower cost of living, lower wages. Of course, they get paid less. But $130,000 in Nashville, Tennessee, is very different than $130,000 in New York City, and so the salaries are different. It could also be that you've got smaller union locals. That you tend to find that managers of larger organizations tend to get paid more. It's a more complex job. More skill tends to be required to manage 2,000 people than to manage 100 people. And so we generally find that officers at larger companies get paid more. Well, if right to work is reducing the size of your membership, we could also expect that to have an effect on reducing the salaries of union officers. And again, we control for it. And what do we find? We find the same thing. We find that, broadly speaking, most of the relationships are statistically significant, and we're looking at 9 to 17% higher salaries once we control for all these other factors. Actually, for the presidents, as you can see, that the coefficient for union presidents, when weighted by average membership, was not significant. If you don't do the weighting, if you simply do the average across all unions, it is significant. When we specify the model slightly differently, so instead of in percentages, when we take a look at raw salaries, we then find it significant. They're all highly statistically significant, actually. And again, you can see union presidents make an average of $13,000 more, controlling for all these other factors. Vice presidents make about $20,000 more. Treasurers make $23,000 more. And it's going to be a union business manager in a non-right-to-work state. $30,000 wage premium that comes with that after controlling for all these other factors. So what's the summary here? What's the bottom line? I don't think union officers are particularly venal or selfish people. There are certainly plenty of bad apples within the union movement, as there are within many businesses. It's human nature that people take advantage of power given to them. But I think for the most part, like most business officers, even business officers at a company with a monopoly, they're generally trying to do their job and do the right thing. But when you're in a monopoly, you don't have that institutional incentive to put the customer first. You can get away with paying less, with charging them more and paying yourself more. You don't have to cut those dues because they've got nowhere to go. And so in any business, any organization, generally tends to think that they can spend their money better than someone else can, and they're going to tend to charge more when they can get away with it, when they don't have that pressure of the consumer voting with their feet. And similarly, You just don't have that internal pressure. You know, I think Bob's deserved a raise. He's been doing a real hard work in the union. Yes, let's give him that, $15,000 raise or promotion or what have you. You've got all the incentives within the organization to give raises, and you don't have the pressure of losing customers to put downward pressure on the labor costs that the unions impose on their members. And so the bottom line, I think, is that we see that competition works. There's a reason we insist on competitions for businesses. There's a reason we've got antitrust laws that say that you can't, unless you're someone like De Beers as an international cartel, and their legality under, we don't have international antitrust laws, but domestically, there's a reason we say that AT&T couldn't have their long-standing monopoly on the telephone market, that they had to get broken up. We did that to benefit consumers, and anyone with a smartphone today is probably pretty darn grateful for that. And similarly, the same is true of unions. And I'd just like to close actually with a quote from the Secretary Treasurer of the United Auto Workers, who was their former Southern Region Director. And his name's Gary Castillo. This is something I've never understood, that people think right to work hurts unions. To me, it helps them. You don't have to belong if you don't want to. So if I go to an organizing drive, I can tell these workers, if you don't like this arrangement, you don't have to belong. Versus, if we get 50% of you, then all of you have to belong whether you like it or not. I don't even like the way that sounds, because it's a voluntary system. And if you don't think the system's earning its keep, then you don't have to pay. And I think if we have laws that force the unions to earn their keep, then those workers will get lower costs and better representation, and I think that's something everyone should champion. And with that, Terry, if you'd like to give us some insight on your experiences as a union member.
Well, thank you, James.
Right to Work State.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you for the study and all the great work you've done over the years, and thank you, Heritage Foundation, for all the work you've done over the years, and I'm sure will continue to do for many, many, many years to come. But also thank all of you for coming today and all of you for watching today. It's a very important study, I believe, throughout the United States, and one that's very near and dear to my heart. Well, I want to take you back a little over 2 years ago. On December 6, 2012, I sat in the conference room at Michigan Governor Rick Snyder's office. And as the press were jamming in, they were there waiting to hear a message from the governor of something that they knew was going to be momentous and a statement that was going to be historic in Michigan, that right to work was now on the table. Now, the governor invited me into this meeting and sitting at the table with him, along with the lieutenant governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader, because he knew that as a current union member, over the last couple of years, my message had been powerful and basically essentially needed in order to counter the false claims that were coming from union executives and some of the protesters that were actually just across the street on the grounds of the Capitol building. Just 5 days later, on December 11th, the day dawned in Lansing, for some full of hope, excitement, and a sense of historical importance of what was going to happen that day. But unfortunately for others, the day dawned with anger, with the thought of violence and really some hatred seething in their heart. See, my job that day was really not to engage the people out on the grounds of the Capitol, but to engage the media and make the public argument why right to work is systemically needed, not only for union members in the state of Michigan, but basically for union members around the United States. Literally just minutes after I was done doing an on-air interview with Larry Kudlow, I received the phone call that the governor, without any pomp or cameras or an audience, signed Michigan right-to-work bills. There was one for the public sector and one for the private sector. Michigan, the home of the UAW. Michigan, for many in the United States, the epitome of what unions represent. Michigan was now the newest home to all the rights, freedoms, and protections that come to union workers when they pass a right-to-work law. It was a glorious day, and obviously a day that I'll never forget. So that was the day that it was passed in December 11th. Now, what has happened since then? Well, in Michigan, it's been interesting. Some of you may know this. The law did not go into effect right away. In Michigan, the law went into effect 90 days after the end of that session, which meant that the law went into effect March 28, 2013. Now, between the time of passage and the time that it went into effect, we saw a mad rush of union contracts and union officials trying to extend their contracts in order to deny workers the rights that come with the right to work law. Most of those were in the public sector, and in fact, most of those in the public sector were teachers' union contracts. And in Michigan, we saw many teachers' unions extend their contracts, in one case up to 10 years, so that their teachers could not enjoy the rights, freedoms, and protections that come with the right to work law. And I think it's interesting to note that teachers rely on taxpayer money. So in other words, they use taxpayer funds to deny their own workers the rights, freedoms, and protections that come with right to work. Again, like I said, up to 10 years in one case. So in Michigan, since that time, a lot of the press has been on the teachers' unions, the Michigan Education Association, trying to make it difficult for their teachers to exercise their right to work. They have established an August opt-out window, which they say is the only month that teachers can opt out of the union if they choose to do so. Now, recently, an administrative law judge ruled that illegal, but that's on appeal. And in Michigan right now, teachers still have to wait for that August opt-out window. There's been many court challenges in Michigan, which we knew would happen, and defended quite a bit by the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation. And in fact, I was part of an amicus brief that the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation represented me in. Michigan Supreme Court case right now that was heard in January. Union attorneys contend that the Civil Service Commission in Michigan should be the only institution and should have exclusive authority. By the way, unions love that word, exclusive. Should have the exclusive authority power to determine right to work laws in future contracts. Now that affects 31,000 Michigan employees. And the reason the Supreme Court is hearing it is the unions lost that case at the Court of Appeals, and they appealed it to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court will rule on that this summer. But because of this study, I really want to talk about the UAW and what's going to happen here in 2015. For many of you, let me explain that the UAW, when the law was passed, was under their current contract. The law does not have the ability to change current contracts. It only has the ability to stop future contracts from including the compulsory language in the contract. So for many UAW workers in Michigan, all UAW workers in Michigan in the private sector, September 2015 is when their contract expires and when they can finally exercise their rights. So how is the UAW reacting? Well, this past summer at the Constitutional Convention, they voted to increase dues by 25%. 25% all at once. And what's interesting is that they said it's to shore up the strike fund, getting ready to go into the contract negotiations. Now, when you look at the figures, that will bring in the union an additional $45 million annually. But yet, at the Constitutional Convention, the very next vote, after they voted to increase the dues, they also voted to allow union officials to remove up to $85 million out of the strike fund for various activities such as organizing drives or, quote, other initiatives intended to increase UAW membership, unquote. So it's going to add $45 million annually, but they voted to take $85 million out of the strike fund. So the dues increase was essentially not needed. And as I say, if hypocrisy was capital, the UAW would never have had to need to increase the dues because it's very hypocritical for the dues increase. The UAW has approximately about 400,000 members total, and in my opinion, this dues increase means that they outsource their bad decisions onto the backs of the rank and file, plain and simple. And how is the UAW preparing for the contract talks in September? Well, they just promoted a UAW member and the founder of an organization called Progress Ohio. To me, it essentially means that the union political agenda is going to stay there and stay very strong through the contract. Union Conservatives, the group I found, is going to be very active this summer in a media campaign and educational campaign for UAW workers throughout the state of Michigan. I want to read for you real quickly an op-ed that I had in the Detroit News, or it's some small excerpts out of an op-ed I had in Detroit News on January 1st of this year. I wanted it to be on January 1st because I wanted it to send a message to UAW officials that we are waiting and ready for this coming year and these contract negotiations. And the op-ed goes something like this. In September, the UAW 4-year contract once again comes up for renewal. While many of the normal contract issues will be on the table again this year, the negotiations will be the most unusual and critically important that the union has ever had to face. Because of past actions of UAW officials and that Michigan is now a right-to-work state, those at the helm of the UAW have much to fear. Many workers feel no benefit from union membership or are angry that their dues are used to fund a far-left political agenda. After the contract expires, they will be free to exercise their rights, freedoms, and protections that come from the right-to-work law passed in 2012. The union may try intimidation or legal and strategic tactics to deny workers their rights, but ultimately, they cannot stop the inevitable growth of freedom and choice in the workplace. Because of these freedoms, UAW executives must realize that the new contract must be not only a contract between the union and employers, but a contract between the union and the worker as well. Any future rise in union membership will not come from outdated compulsory activities. It can only come if officials, union officials, rethink what unionism is and what it is not. The best ideas are coming from outside agencies that see an unlimited potential for positive influence, if those unions are willing to break from the antiquated mold and embrace free market principles instead of special interests. Now, that's an excerpt from the op-ed, and you can certainly find that on the Detroit News website. Let's quickly look at Michigan's statistics that were just released on Friday from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on union membership rate. In 2014, Michigan had a total of 4,028,000 workers in the workforce. 585,000 of those are unionized, which is at 14.5% of the total workforce. Now, that is a big drop in union membership. Over 2 years, Michigan's lost 44,000 union members. Now, in my opinion, many of those jobs that have come to Michigan are because we passed right to work, and they're non-union jobs that we would have never had the opportunity to compete for if Michigan did not pass the right to work law. And of course, as you can imagine, union executives are using these figures and already saying that it proves that right to work hurts workers and destroys unions. But I say different. I say, it's a huge opportunity actually for unions here in Michigan. If they would only embrace free market principles, hire sales managers so they can go out and sell their services to the workers in Michigan and sell their product. And most importantly, I believe they need to redesign their business model to become more of a service organization instead of an outdated compulsory organization. And finally, let me say this. Because I'm a union member, as you can imagine, I've received a lot of threats and a lot of name-calling over the years. In fact, I have a wall of shame in my office at home that I write down every name that I've been called. Well, the name that I'm called more often is a word that you've all heard is the name scab. I'm sure you've all heard that. And it used to bother me, I have to tell you right from the beginning. But I've changed my mind on this, and I'm actually pretty proud of the word. Because when you think about it, what actually is a scab? Well, it's a natural protection to cover old wounds and injuries so that healing can begin. And I believe we need more free market union members to stand up proudly and say, you know what, I too am a scab because I believe in rights, freedoms, and protections for all union workers around the United States. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Amy Milliken, and I am proud to say that I'm the county attorney for Bowling Green in Warren County, Kentucky. And James, thank you for having me today. Thank you for all of you who braved the cold and the snow to come out, and thank you for everyone who's watching today. Anytime, I'm a lifelong resident of Bowling Green in Warren County, and so anytime I'm in front of a microphone, I have to brag on Warren County, Kentucky. Warren County is the hub of about a 15-county area. We have 102,000 citizens, which we think is just huge. We are the hub for medical services, dining experiences, retail shopping, and certainly employment. Many people drive in from Simpson, Logan, Butler, Todd to work in Bowling Green and Warren County. We boast many automotive manufacturing jobs in Bowling Green and Warren County. We're very, very proud of that fact. And as you can imagine, I'm thrilled to say that we are home of the Corvette, America's sports car. So I'm very proud of that. I am also a graduate of Western Kentucky University, which is located in Bowling Green in Warren County, and we are the fastest growing university in the Commonwealth of Kentucky with over 21,000 students. Warren County also hosts, I'm almost finished, Warren County also hosts the Gatton Academy, which for the past 3 years has been voted as America's #1 high school in America. And so we're so proud of that fact. We're so proud of all of those facts. So as county attorney, and county attorney in different states means different things, but in Kentucky, under the Constitution of Kentucky and also under the statutes of Kentucky, I am charged with representing the Warren County Fiscal Court. And the Warren County Fiscal Court is a county, almost like a council, if you will. They're charged with handling all the fiscal affairs of the county. And when our right to work ordinance was passed, we had 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. Our county judge executive, Mike Buchanan, who actually was scheduled to be here today, and I'm stepping in for him, but he's a Republican, and for count's sake, I'm a Democrat. So we are equally divided on that court. Even today, we did that in December, and the court has changed. We're still 3, 3, 1, and 1. So we're all still the same. In Kentucky, counties are considered political subdivisions of the state. Cities are not. Cities are incorporated areas. They are actual corporations in the state. In addition, counties in Kentucky were, in the early 1900s, granted powers of fiscal court, which is a statute that grants us certain powers and authorities under the state statutes. In 1972, they actually expanded that authority. They expanded our powers to include, and that it was amended actually in 1978 after the initial 1972 amendment. And they gave us the right and the power to regulate and control the fiscal affairs of the county, to regulate commerce for the protection and convenience of our citizens, and to promote economic development within the county. It's important to note that with 120 counties in Kentucky, 120 fiscal courts, and 120 county attorneys, you can imagine we all do things a little differently. And the legislature knew that when they passed this home rule statute. They knew that we were best suited to know locally what our citizens needed. Because you see, I see our citizens on a daily basis. We shop at Walmart together. We pump gas at the same gas station. I see them when my children are cheerleading or playing Little League. So I see them and they talk to me. I know locally what my citizens need. When the price of gas goes up, when the price of milk and bread goes up, Washington, D.C. or Frankfort, Kentucky, our capital, might as well be a foreign country to the people in Bowling Green and Warren County, because they can't reach out and touch those leaders. They can only touch us and talk to us. And so locally, they expect me to take action. And I believe that our local leaders are charged with doing what's best for our citizens. Our fiscal court locally knows that we need jobs. Absolutely, Warren County has been successful. Absolutely, Warren County has been prosperous. But we can't slow down. If you stop, you're left behind. We have to continue fighting. We have to continue working to get the better paying jobs, more jobs, and expand our reach within our area. Because when we do that, we expand our tax base. We're able to better serve our citizens with creating more roads, fixing the roads that are there, expanding our park system for our children, expanding the quality of life amenities that not only our citizens, but I talked to you about that 15-county hub, they come in. And when they come in to enjoy our Southern Kentucky Performing Arts Center, they come in and not only spend a ticket, not only purchase a ticket to see a wonderful Broadway show, they also go to dinner. Sometimes they spend the night, and usually they go shopping, which I always encourage them to do. But what I'm telling you is we have to continue working to expand that to bring in the good jobs. Our local leaders work very hard on a daily basis to create new jobs. We work with our chamber every day. And our chamber, they look at our leaders and they say, without the right to work, you're sending away 75% of the prospects. What's a prospect? A prospect is someone who has the money, who has the jobs, they're ready, willing, and able to invest in your county. They want to come in with jobs. They want to come in and provide your people employment. And so when our leaders heard 75% is being sent away, we have to do something about that. And so we go to Frankfurt, and our leaders go, our business leaders, our elected leaders go to Frankfurt, but we can't get it out of committee. And so they look to our local leaders to take action. And we look and we say, what can we do locally? Because it's very disconcerting when Warren County has 2 interstates running through it, soon to be 3. We are centrally located between Nashville, Tennessee, and Louisville, Kentucky. We are a great location. I need to add that to my initial list. We are a great location, but we are right in the middle. And even though we're in such a wonderful situation, we're seeing our jobs go to Georgia, Indiana, Michigan. You're leaving us for Michigan. And I'm like, what? And so we want to get them back. And so we looked and we said, why are they going to Georgia? Why are they going to Texas? Why are they going to Michigan? They're all right-to-work states. And the site selectors are looking at right-to-work states, and they're not so much looking at non-right-to-work states. So when we couldn't get it out of committee, and we decided we've got to take some steps locally, we started doing research. And on December the 19th, Warren County, Kentucky, became the first county in the Commonwealth, and I believe in the United States, to pass a local right-to-work ordinance. Very quickly, others followed. But Warren County didn't take this step lightly. We researched for hours and hours to determine whether or not we thought we had the legal authority to take this step. In addition, after I wrote my letter to Judge Buchanan and put my opinion in writing, something I certainly stand behind, I sent my opinion to Gaines Penn and to Charles Buzz English, who a very well-respected labor attorney, Gaines Penn, at the firm of English, Lucas, Priest, and Owsley, and Buzz English is a former Kentucky Bar Association president. And I said, look this over, make sure I'm right, give me your opinion. I want to make sure that my research is correct and I didn't miss anything. And they supported that. And in addition, Judge Buchanan sent my opinion and Gaines and Buzz's opinion to retired Chief Justice of the Kentucky Supreme Court, Joseph Lambert, and retired Justice Bill Graves. And they too gave an opinion that says, we believe Kentucky counties have the right to do this. Now, you may say, that's all well and good, but what about that Puckett case in Kentucky? There is a case in Kentucky that was decided in 1965 in which the city of Shelbyville tried to pass a local law, a local right-to-work law. And in 1965, the highest court in the Commonwealth of Kentucky was the Court of Appeals. And they said, you can't do it. Cities can't do it. Well, here's my argument against someone relying solely on Puckett for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Number one, it was decided in 1965, well before the time of 1978, when those specific powers were granted to the counties to regulate commerce and to promote economic development. In addition, it's directed at a city, an incorporated area in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I'm a county. I'm a political sovereign. I gain my powers directly from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I'm an arm of the state, if you will. In addition, the court cited no authority upon which they based their decision. They just decided, and no one, and that was the highest court at the time, and so it wasn't appealed. Now, you may be looking around and say, that's all well and good, but if I remember correctly, the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Kentucky entered an opinion that says she's wrong. Well, he did. And Jack and I are friends, and I called Jack before he issued his opinion. And I said, I understand you're going to issue this opinion, and I understand that you're probably not going to agree with me. And he said, well, you're wrong. And I said, well, we're friends. We've been friends a long time, but you're wrong. And, and I'm right, and I feel certain that I'm right on this. And remember, locally, it's not political for me. It's not political at all. This is just doing what's best for the 102,000 people that I represent on a daily basis. The 102,000 that I see at the ballpark and at the Southern Kentucky Performing Arts Center and while I'm at Walmart. And I have to do what's best for them. And I will continue to do that until I'm no longer in office. So, did we expect a lawsuit? Absolutely. And I'll tell you why, because as they exited the fiscal courtroom that day, they said, we'll see you in court. And I said, we're going to get sued. Just so you know. And as surprisingly, despite that fact, after we passed it, 4 others passed it fairly in short order. 5 total counties in the Commonwealth. There are 120. Keep that number in mind. We have 5 more that have had their first reading. I have about 25 more on board ready within the next 90 days to pass it as well. I believe within 180 days from the initial passage in December, so between now and June, give or take, I believe over 1 million people in the Commonwealth of Kentucky will be governed under a local ordinance for right to work. So, knowing all that, I also want to tell you that Warren County has not been sued. Fulton County, Todd County, they have not been sued. But Hardin County, which is the Elizabethtown, Kentucky, they're the county seat, and they have been sued. They were sued pretty much immediately after their second reading. And in Kentucky, in order for an ordinance to be passed, it has to have 2 readings. So that's why I say second reading. And, you know, they're fighting it because they believe in the right to work. They believe that their citizens deserve that. We think that with this passage, we believe that with the strong fight that Hardin County is going to put up to make sure that their ordinance stands strong, we believe this should send a very strong message to our state legislatures. They need to know that if over 1 million people in the next 6 months are governed under a right-to-work local ordinance, they need to look at it at the state level. We believe this is only a step to the state level. Our fiscal court absolutely wanted to do something. Others wanted to do something, and we do believe that this will help our economies grow. So what we have seen over the past 6 weeks in Warren County, Kentucky, we have had two site selectors contact us with 2 prospects that told us we had Kentucky absolutely marked off. But now that you have taken this step, we want to come and talk to you. 2. That's a huge deal. You think 2's a little number. It's not a little number. we love those 2, and we want to talk to them. We also were contacted by an international site selector that said, hey, I saw this in the news. I want to come talk to you. I have someone that I think will fit in just right in Warren County, Kentucky. We are thrilled. We're thrilled beyond belief. In the past 6 weeks, what else have we accomplished? We have accomplished everyone in the Commonwealth talking about right to work. I can't say that for the past couple of years. But over the past 6 weeks, they've been talking about it because locally they're talking about it. And that's where it starts. It starts at the local level, at the donut shop, at the gas station. And it also has people talking about Warren County, Kentucky. and I want everyone to know that Warren County, Kentucky is progressive. We think outside the box, and we are absolutely open for business. And we want you to call us because we want to be your next business location. So we're excited.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. And if you want to know anything else about Warren County, let me know.
We've got some time for some Q&A. Alex here has a microphone that he'll be passing around, so please wait till the microphone comes so the people watching online can hear the question as well. And when you ask your question, just please briefly state your name and your affiliation before the question. And also questions generally should end with a question mark.
Yeah.
So the gentleman in the back.
Hi, I'm Matt from the Heritage Foundation, and I wanted to ask Amy
Yes, Milliken. Yes.
a question. So being a Democrat, you probably got a lot of heat for that. Did you get any angry phone calls from the president or Allison Lundergan Grimes or the governor?
I did get an angry call from the president of the UAW. He actually came to see me, and I was going to be sworn in. I was just reelected, and as I was walking, he grabbed my arm. He said, "I want to talk to you after this." And I said, "I'm happy to talk with you." And I understand his position. I just respectfully disagree with it. So I did get some phone calls, not from the political realm. None.
Any more questions?
My name is David. I'm with the Senate Budget Committee. Question for Mr. Bowman. I'm sure you've had a chance to speak with a number of rank-and-file UAW members. Could you discuss some of the reasons they might give you for why they aren't happy with the status quo outside of right to work?
Sure. I'll give you a couple examples. Number one, when the UAW passed the 25% dues increase, a few days later, the UAW headquarters in Detroit, also known as Solidarity House, although I should call it Forced Solidarity House. But anyway, that's another issue. They call it Solidarity House. The UAW was picketed by their own UAW members, picketing against their own union officials for raising dues at such an unusual time to raise dues. So there is a growing sentiment of anger against the UAW within the rank and file, number one on that dues increase. Number two, this group that I founded, there's a lot of UAW members who are very angry with the political agenda, as I said, that the UAW engages in, not only on economic issues, but on social issues as well. And we don't see any reason why a labor union should get into those issues. And lastly, let me just mention that, as many of you may know, the UAW back in 2007 started a two-tier wage system. And what that means is employees hired after that date came into the UAW, came into the auto workers at a much lower rate of pay than what is now known as the legacy auto workers. There's a lot of anger about that on the floor of the assembly plants. People doing the exact same job, but yet getting paid half the wages. So what we're seeing is the UAW taking positions now, already preparing for September contract talks, and saying that the two-tier wage system is one thing that they're really going to work hard to get rid of. In fact, I think a couple things may happen in the summer, knowing that Michigan's a right-to-work state. I think there's a very good possibility there will be a strike. Whether it's even for a day, it doesn't matter, but the UAW want to show the workers that they're rough and tough and ready to fight for them. So I think it's very possible that there could be a day-long strike or something like that. I think the UAW may even, when it gets close to September, go back to the original dues and get rid of the 25% dues increase and say, you know what, look here, we're saving you money. And so I think there's a lot of things that the UAW is going to do to prepare for that expiration date on that contract, along with media, along with billboards and radio commercials showing that they're like grandma and apple pie, but yet running around like Rocky the Boxer, ready to fight the good fight. So the UAW is going to market themselves a lot differently this year than I think they have in the past to fight a lot of that anger that's coming from within the rank and file.
Could we, Matt over here in the corner?
Hi, Matt Patterson, Center for Worker Freedom and Americans for Tax Reform. I want to congratulate everyone in Kentucky, Amy. This is something that ATR and the Center for Worker Freedom wholeheartedly supports, so congratulations. I was wondering if anyone on the panel could just talk about why right to work is such an attractant for businesses. You've done a good job explaining why it's cheaper for workers, paying lower dues, but what is it about right to work areas specifically that attracts businesses, and why is it so important for businesses to choose right to work localities? Thank you.
I'll chime in here at first, and if other people want to add. I mean, it's no surprise that businesses generally don't want to get unionized. That unions are an enormous cost and difficulty for them to deal with, and they, having to negotiate with the union and these exhaustive contracts before you can make any substantive change to your business organization just makes businesses a lot less sluggish. Now, basically, management's going to get the union they deserve. The only thing right to work affects is whether or not you can be forced to pay union dues. You've got plenty of it, like Nevada is a right to work state. The culinary union and the unions in Las Vegas are really strong. If workers feel they would benefit from a union, they have every right to do it. But what happens with right to work is that there's less payoff to the union from organizing a company. Because for them, it's basically a business decision. They have to spend a certain amount on organizing. They've got some expected odds of success. Maybe it's a 25% chance. And so they weigh, is it worth spending $3 or $4 million trying to organize this company vis-a-vis, say, the $250,000 a year we'll get in dues from here on out if we're successful. But under a right-to-work law, that the expected payoff is less because all of a sudden they can't force everyone to pay. That they have to charge lower dues to attract the members, and some of the members aren't going to pay even at the lower schedule, and so it changes their cost-benefit calculation. And union organizing drops by about 50% after states pass right-to-work laws. I mean, if a company is mistreating its workers, if it's treating people as things, they're going to get unionized, and they deserve to get unionized. And I have very little sympathy for that company. But there's an awful lot of companies that get targeted by these union drives simply because the unions want the dues and the income, and they're willing to basically roll the dice and say, we'll spend several $1 million attacking this company and trying to persuade the workers to sign on, and if we're successful, we can force all of them to pay $700 a year from here on out. And that's a pretty big sum of money. Companies want to know that they're as long as they treat the workers well, that they can avoid being the target of a union drive, and basically, right to work makes that a lot more likely because it's just a lot less of a payoff for the union to go after them. So I don't know if either of you want to add anything to that.
Sure, I'll just add something real quickly. Something that I have experienced and something a business owner told me on the border of Ohio and Michigan. One of the issues was quality of life. They want to look at what's best for their employees now and any future employees. And the quality of life issue, they look at communities that have strong communities, that have parks and recreations and things when they look at site selections. So a quality of life issue. I think that a lot of business owners may not mind if their union gets unionized, so to speak. But they want to make sure that their employees are not forced into it. So a quality of life issue might come. But right to work is important, but it's not the only thing as well. I mean, you've got to have good tax policies in the state that you're going to, and other economic issues as well. So right to work is a big part of that, but it's not the only part. So.
Thank you.
We'll have time for one more question after this.
Thank you. I'm Dino Drudy. I am an officer in a union local and a conservative. And I heard you, Terry, say that union conservatives. Mm-hmm. Now, is that capital U and capital C, meaning an organization you founded?
Yes, it's a nonprofit, a 501c4.
And can you tell us something about it?
Union Conservatives was formed in 2010 after I received my union newsletter that before the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, was passed. My union was pushing for it, and they had an article that said, "Healthcare reform, what would Jesus do?" Now, to give you some context, I actually attended Christian college and seminary, so obviously I really picked up on this. And as I read the article, I got angrier and angrier because they completely took Scripture out of context and make Jesus, number one, look like he would be a socialist and that he would ultimately approve of Obamacare. Well, at that point, after just being bombarded for, I think, 13 years at the time, of political propaganda. I just said, enough. Somebody's got to do something. And I formed Union Conservatives not as an anti-union organization. We're actually pro-union, but in the context of what unions were created to do, not what they've become. And that's just to represent their employees in the realms of the workplace. So Union Conservatives is there to help union members train on issues, to help them learn about issues and expose what's really going on with unions and what they're spending money on. So,
We have time for one last question. The gentleman in the, yes, sir.
With the plaid shirt.
Yes, the plaid shirt. Sorry, you've had your hand up pretty much the whole time.
Thank you. My question is for Amy.
Yes.
I'm just interested in knowing what are you said you're Democrat, but
Yes.
if I remember the theory of federalism and democracy, your position looks like just for a Republican conservative, because in this theory, all entity of the structure are equal. The federal government or the county can be equal if they have something to put forward. So I wanted to know what was your premises when you defended this position.
Well, the law in the Commonwealth, I take all politics out of it. They ask me, can we do this? Yes or no? Do we have any law to back us up? Yes or no? And my decision was solely based on the law. And locally, it's not a political issue. It may be at the state or federal level, I don't even know. But I know locally it's not. It's what does the law say and what do the people want? It's all local to me. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's now 1 o'clock, and we don't want to hold you late. There's some sandwiches outside and some cookies if you guys would like lunch. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And we hope that these issues continue to attract more attention in the coming weeks and months.